horticulture, crop insurance, research and extension titles, and miscellaneous. So Bonetta, Mr. Wilson, Professor Che, and Lorette, come on up. And while they're coming up, I'll just, this is what's so impressive about these four truly inspiring experts and community leaders is that they approach this work with such optimism. So we're ending on a note of optimism and what's possible in terms of shifting the Farm Bill from just commodity crops that don't nourish our communities to what would it take to devise a system that supports nourishing agrobiodiverse crops that are culturally relevant and deeply nutritious and delicious. And so what would that look like from a producer perspective, from a research perspective, and from a movement perspective? So we'll go ahead and sit down. We're going to start with Mr. Wilson to represent the Federation. We're going to go in order of the longest serving organization to the newest. So we start with the Federation to center its leadership in this work. And Mr. Wilson is going to give us some expertise for about 12 minutes. And then we'll pass the mic to, next is Lorette, because Rural Coalition has been in this work since 1978 and is one of the leaders in racial justice and farm bill advocacy and transformation. We're so honored to have her join us. Then we have Professor Che Axum, who's joining us from University of District Columbia, which is the only urban land grant in the nation. And it's a proudly HBCU university and is focusing on, his department is the College of Urban Ag and Gardening Education, and he has a history with the Federation he'll share with us. And then we wrap up with Bonetta, the visionary founder of the newest organization to transform ag policy, UJAMAA Cooperative Farming Alliance. And everyone has just 12 minutes to pass on their wisdom and expertise, and then we'll open up to questions. Thank you.
To those of you that know me, you know my preference is the podium. How's my voice today, sound man? The sound man told me I had the best voice in the world. And you know, I'm excited about the opportunity. I'm excited about what we are hearing. If I was really in the pulpit this morning, I would say, this evening, I would say, hold on. Hold on just a little while longer, and everything gonna be all right. That's what I would tell you. No doubt in my mind, Ben and I was in school at Alcorn together, and Ben and I, we continue to move on. John has been involved in this work for many years, and John continues to hold on. So I'm saying to our young people, Rome was not built in a day. We are not going to change a broken system in a day. But we are going to make patches. And at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, that generation that will follow us will have it better than what we have had it. And there's no doubt in my mind that we are going to hold on. I have been involved in this urban agricultural movement for more than 30 years. And that's a part of this bill that we are not talking about. We are not talking about urban agriculture, but we are talking about small disadvantaged farmers. And I heard Cornelius Blanton say over the years that our average farm has less than 100 acres of land that we are trying to hold on to. And so we got to do our best, not only just to hold on, but how do we increase the acreages and also increase the number of farmers that comes from marginalized and underserved communities, and how do we make that difference? And they gave me a perfect lead-in today to that silver bullet question. That silver bullet question, because this is something that I have been dealing with and talking about and trying to get the urban ag folks to deal with. Those 13 people, those 12 people that serve on the Urban Ag Committee with me. So we have an opportunity right here as we move forward on this farm bill to include Urban Ag in that and make our recommendations to Secretary Vilsack. And what I am recommending to them that we do is that as we open up these urban agriculture centers, and as I understand it, it's going to be about 20 urban agriculture centers across the United States of America. Georgia already has its urban ag center. It is opened up in the Sam Nunn building. And we talked about, making it accessible to people. The Sam Nunn building is downtown Atlanta. Ain't no free parking downtown Atlanta. But you can get pretty close on the bus. But think about trying to get into a federal building on this day and time. It's difficult. And our people are not going to go into the federal building. What I've suggested to my urban ag folks is that we create a mobile urban ag center that will go out into the communities. Because we ain't coming downtown. So you need to bring it to us. And we want to make sure that we are taking advantage of these urban agricultural opportunities. If we're going to have a new wave of farmers, they are coming from our inner cities. Another one of my pet peeves that I'm working on, I am trying to create a pipeline to our historical black universities from our high schools so that our students will have an opportunity and a chance to get scholarships to go into agriculture, and even before they graduate, they will have a job. Well, Bobby, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I was at the Manners Conference about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. They had over 200 vendors at that company, and they were hiring agriculture students on the spot. Jobs, you don't even have to look for. If you get in the right place at the right time, they are going to find you. And our children need to know, our counselors in our schools need to know that these are jobs that are starting at 70, and some of these kids are coming out of school making $100,000, $70,000 to $100,000. And you don't have to go out in the fields and do what I do. You want to sit behind a desk, you want to work, be a trained leader in a meat processing plant, you want to work in a grain factory, in the office, everything that is required in business is required in agriculture. You need to hear me. Parents, grandparents, you need to start challenging some of these students towards agriculture. Tuskegee is going to be taking some of our students in their summer ag program this year. Most of our historical black universities have summer ag programs. And if you are a graduating senior, you can come on as a counselor for that program. And you can learn about whether or not you want to be a part of agriculture. Opportunity and a chance. As I close today, I'm gonna get the rest of my time to some of my other colleagues. Thank you. But I do have one other thing. I do have one other thing. This bioscience paper that I talked about earlier, this bioscience paper that really talks about equity, diversity, and inclusion that was published. and it's understanding the impact of equitable collaboration between science institutions and community-based organizations, improving science through community-led research. And I want anybody that want to take you get the QR code to this, and you can download this paper and you can read it. And I want to encourage you to read this paper. I also want to see, a lot of times we think organizations like the Federation of Southern Co-ops are not doing anything. Let's get a Federation and Southern Co-ops and other organizations a big round of applause. For what they are doing here. I'm reminded of a story. When Barack Obama became president, Barack Obama, there was a man in my community came to me and said, yeah, my daddy gonna wear Barack Obama out because he ain't gonna get a chance to do nothing, because Barack, they gonna call him every chance that they get. And that's what we do to the Federation. Any little thing that comes up, we call them, and a lot of times we won't get an answer. Federation is just like any other small organization. They are understaffed, and in most cases underpaid. But yet and still, they are committed to this movement. And I think instead of us criticizing the Federation, figure out some time where you can go down there and volunteer and help them out with some of the things that they need, whether it's in their headquarters office in East Point, Georgia, or whether it's in one of their regional offices, or whether it's down in Epps, Alabama. They have a dormitory down there that you can stay in. So let's take advantage. Instead of criticizing what the Federation is doing, let's support the Federation. God bless you. God bless you. Vote for Bobby Wilson.
Amen, Brother Bobby. Amen. Okay, I think, yes. Okay, I'm going to try. This and 2023 is going to be the 9th Farm Bill that I've been accompanying this community on. I want to call out our board members, Darnella Burkett Winston and John Zippert and Willard Tillman and Millie Trevino Sauceda that are in the room. Our leaders, our members, I want to call out our colleague and friend Abby Fain from Intertribal Ag Council, who's been a partner somewhere. I think she's around here. And I want to run through a bunch of things on risk management. We can go to the first slide. I want to say a few things, one of which is don't sell your land. I'm more terrified of this farm bill than any farm bill I've ever been through in all these years. Right now, there is a lot of money in the Inflation Reduction Act for climate. They keep on saying, well, just say you want the climate money, but don't say what's going to happen to it. And we're like, okay, but who's going to get the climate money? And is it going to be used for actual climate solutions? The ranking minority member on Senate Ag says we should really use it to fund crop insurance, or to cover the baseline of the farm bill, or for deficit reduction, or for something else. So we don't know we have it. But even if it is used, we have to watch what's going to happen. Is it going to go into climate smart corporate agriculture? All these climate smart agreements where every other day, suddenly General Mills is very interested in black farmers. You know a black farmer? I know a black farmer, right, Mr. Tillman? And in Kansas, benefits to hedge funds, teachers, pensions, and foreign investments, what we heard about yesterday from Jordan. Those folks are there to get the climate money. They're to get the federal supports without actually doing any agriculture. And if you have heirs property, they're there because every other day, Darnella's telling me, you get a letter from somebody saying, do you want to sell your land? And don't sell your land. Don't forget to pay the taxes. Get a will. Because we have to look at land tenure in this one. Big tech companies, the Republicans have about 10 precision ag bills. So all of that conservation money, is it going to go towards drones and, monitors and all of these things, plus paying whatever the service fees are, and to be able to repair your own computers, right? And then, or is it going to go to support the people who know how to take care of the land? And what do we do to make sure that these investments go to the people? The federal government needs the communities in this room to heal climate disasters and to stop the disasters and to restore the land. And that means we need to, not only a matter of equity, it's a matter of the survival of the planet. So let's go to the next piece. Let's talk about current federal crop insurance. Those are the premium subsidy is what the government pays, and then those are the total premiums. And if you look after 2010, there's a big jump. That's when the 2008 Farm Bill went into effect. So my other message is we have to be unified and we have to be smart. In 2008, the big news was cut all the money for the subsidies and price supports to farmers. Farmers became the enemy. Let's give it all to fresh fruit and vegetables. Without thinking, who are fresh fruit and vegetables? Some of fresh fruit and vegetables are the biggest and most exploitative companies in the country that exploit who? The farm workers we heard about from Millie yesterday. And so what happened is the money went into crop insurance. And so that's federal money going into crop insurance. And so, we had about 1.2 million policies with 493 million acres. Okay, so let's not do climate. Let's have more disasters, and then crop insurance is what? It's going to cost us more. Okay. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is how much went to farmers and how much went to insurance companies. And so if you see right now, there's as much money going in compensation to insurance companies to pay the agents and to pay whatever as is going to us. So the subsidies, about 60%. So let's go to the next one. Now, I want to raise one other issue here that I think is really important is who's going to make the change? So like between 2003 and 2006, the Farmers of the Rural Coalition, and this included the Farmers of Intertribal Ag Council, the Federation, and a number of other groups around the country said, we've got to start doing financial record keeping. We have to keep our records if we're going to get crop insurance, if we're going to get damage. And so we did record keeping training with over 1,000 farmers, and we did a survey over a couple of years. Here's what we found. I'm going to run through these. This was the population. There were about 1,000 farmers. Here's their education. It was about, 25% American Indian, some Asians. Half of it was African American, Hispanic, Latino. And, they were not big farms. Most of them earned very little. Total farm income, less than $5,000. Go to the next one. Okay, and how many owned land? Some rented land. About 54% produced commodity crops, 54% fresh fruit and vegetables, half are livestock, so a mixed, diversified operation. Let's go to the next one. Ever applied for a loan, been denied, 91, we don't have the percentages here. Ever received USDA disaster assistance, 36%, 13% in commodity programs. At that point, conservation hadn't completely changed, so 8.1 in conservation. Let's go to the next one. Do they have a risk management plan? Do they use a tax accountant, 42%? Did they fill out Schedule F of the tax return, only 18%? And did they ever purchase crop insurance? 9.6% had it, 84% had never done crop insurance. Well, if you don't have the IRS Schedule F, probably not. But the interesting thing, the farmers wanted to know how many had a tax accountant, because oftentimes the tax accountant says, just take the standard deduction, which means you lose a lot of your farm records. Let's go to the next one. So these are some of the results. We also asked them, did they have insurance? And what we found is that most of the people had insurance. 84% had some kind of insurance. 72% had homeowner or rental. Disaster insurance. Did they have liability insurance? Only 25% had crop insurance. And then we said, where did you buy insurance? So let's go to the next one. And they, what was important to do, to choose an agent. And basically what they said is people that we know. is who's important. And let's go to the next one. And where did you learn about it? And 71% are most likely to learn about it from another person. What's important about this? Let's go to the next one. This is what, the tribal farmers, Catherine Minthorn was telling us, we could do this training all the time. And right now, we're finally getting investments in technical assistance to teach the farmers. This is the first time the Federation, the Rural Coalition, Oklahoma Black Historical, Operation Spring Plant, all of us has had any money to be out with the farmers actually doing this whole thing that many of the larger farmers pay people to go. Let's go to the next one. So we were talking to Marcia Bunger, who's a Japanese-American rancher from South Dakota, and we were telling her about this, and we said the problem is we don't have any crop insurance agents or insurance adjusters who come from our communities. How about we have a training? Within a month, RMA put together a training program, which we've started with and we suggested IAC be the leaders of this. And so we have started a program to build new relationships with the crop insurance sector and to actually train people. Let's go on. And so what we're trying to do is get a pipeline of insurance agents and adjusters. And some of the black farmers are saying, you send a black insurance adjuster out on the white farmer's land, what's going to happen? And we're going to have to be ready for that too. Let's go to the next one. But this is how we learn. This is something I learned many years ago when I was doing research in the Philippines under martial law with farmers under the Marcos regime. And we're talking about how do people learn. And, people learn from mass media, that's the green part, but over time it's about interpersonal relationships. Getting right back to what Dr. Gail Christopher said in our opening, is we learn from each other. And so this is diffusion of innovations theory. Let's go to the next one. But what's interesting about this is we change the innovations themselves. So what happens is people adopt them because you're constantly saying, here's what we have to do. John Zippert knows we need a microloan. Let's get a microloan. I learned from Bert, the extension agent, when I was in the Philippines, they were trying to get all of Central Luzon to plant the new varieties of rice back to the Green Revolution. And one day he just came in at lunchtime and he pounded his fist on the table and he said, it's inhuman. We cannot ask our wives to plant an extra planting of rice every year. And see, that was the thing that they didn't check. They didn't check, we want you to grow more rice because we want to export it, but we haven't asked what implications that has for the family. And see, that's what's happening right now with these climate smart innovations. We're going to have people with drones and all kinds of things, but do they actually know how to take care of the land? Let's go to the next one. It's the early adopters that are important, that are going to generate the new practices and the new ways of doing things. And so, it's our youth that are going to share a lot of ideas. And how do we go back to a system where we actually take the methods that our ancestors have taught us and bring them on into the future? Let's go to the next one. Okay, and this is kind of dense, but the General Accounting Office did a study of risk management, and what they said is, right now there are no payment limits. There are payment limits in many other programs. If you earn more than $900,000, you can't get into that program. That doesn't exist for crop insurance, so we have people getting $1.2 million a year. And also, when they, in the last reinsurance agreement, they basically said that if the amount of money changes, you can't reduce compensation to the insurance companies. And we want to reduce compensation to the insurance companies. But what we're also saying is we need to keep the investment in technical assistance. There's no farmer, John is right, there's no black farmer, there's no person of color that goes into those offices that doesn't receive some kind of discrimination, dismissal, or whatever. We need to make sure the investments in 22006 and 22007 stay there, keep supporting us, that technical assistance comes from qualified technical assistance providers, people who know the culture and the language of the people they're serving. We need to redirect crop insurance to support more diversified regenerative operations, and we need technical assistance to teach farmers about it. We need to change who populates the system. So we need more diverse set of insurance agents. We need more diverse county committees. We need more diverse conservation districts. And we need to, teach all of our farmers about these practices. We need to get this pilot project on training crop insurance agents made permanent. We also need USDA to have a system to declare a disaster for farm workers, to inform that for USDA to inform farmers when heat stress conditions are there and it's time to get their workers out of the field. And we need to establish an emergency program for qualified CBOs to provide assistance to farm workers in emergencies. Let's go to the next one. So we're kind of back to this last question, and we are going to have to work together if we're going to get this work done. And I think this is the last one I'm going to say. Remember not to sell land. Let's also remember we need to work together on this farm bill. We can't be arguing over things, united we bargain, divided we beg. And let's also remember in the last farm bill, the day in 2018, the day the heirs property language, which we'd worked for all those years, passed in the Senate on Doug Jones and Tim Scott's amendments, Mr. Zippert pushing for that, getting into the farm bill. That was the day that Ralph Page transitioned and the great beyond became greater. And we, Kathy Ozer and all of those that have gone before us, we're carrying that work. And it's don't sell your land. There's a lot of fraud out there. Don't sign a power of attorney. Don't have somebody steal your land. And the last thing I tell you to remember is that thing about stressed. You take the word stressed and spell it backwards, it says desserts.
All right. Hello, everybody. One day I'm going to prepare before I talk, and that is not today. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Axum. I'm the Director of Urban Ag and Garden Education for the University of the District of Columbia. And as someone mentioned earlier, UDC is a land-grant institution. I think we all know what land-grant institutions are. But UDC is kind of different. I went to University of Maryland, and quite different from UDC. So UDC is a land-grant institution, so what does that really mean? It's primarily land-grant, so we don't have any large dairy farmers or soybean farmers we need to give information to, or poultry farmers or swine. We don't have any people like that. We just have we solve urban problems in urban situations. So this is kind of what we do. I did not grow up on a farming background. Grew up right in Washington, D.C., right in the middle of the city. But the connection I did have with farming, I guess agriculture, my family was originally from Alabama. And when they told me about coming here to speak, they told me that Mr. Burkett and people like that were speaking. And I remembered that my dad was a photographer for the Emergency Land Fund and also the Federation. And so we still have a lot of those. And he transitioned about 2 years ago, and we're still sorting through those thousands and thousands of pictures. He was a photojournalist, so he did the land fund photography. He worked for Muhammad Ali, worked for Stevie Wonder, so we're going through all these photos now, but we do have a lot of photos, and hopefully, we can get everything together to share. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with George Washington Carver's kind of speech he did called The Bridge Builder. Anybody heard it? Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase quite a bit, but it was a place in Alabama, down south, where they had a town. And in that town, there was a creek or a stream which went kind of through the town. So people had to really kind of try to transverse this. What they had to do, sometimes it was too deep at certain parts near the city where most of the people were, so they had to walk maybe quarter mile or a mile down and then cross over where it was a little more narrow to cross over. So there was a young man, he would go out every day and he would come there and he would sometimes he would wade across, but sometimes he wouldn't want to walk down there. So one day he saw a gentleman building a bridge, and was the older man building the bridge, and he kind of talked to the older man and said, you know, what are you doing here, building the bridge? He said, well, you know, I'm going to make it easier for people in town, you know, maybe I can help people. And so as this young man would pass there, you know, every day and weeks and months, this older man would be building this bridge. And finally, you know, the bridge was built. And the young man stopped to the older man one day and said, you know, guy, look, man, you're old, man. You're not going to be able to use this bridge. You're probably not going to even be here in the next 5 or 6 years. You know, you're old. And the older man looked at him and said, look, I didn't build this bridge for me. I built it for you. So we are all, in many ways, bridge builders. So that's what I kind of think of myself as, a bridge builder for what I do as far as engaging young people, as far as being innovative in urban ag. So we do some interesting things at the university. So I'm going to segue a little bit and talk about one of the things that I've become very interested in, and how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and what we're doing. Next slide. So, you know, we talk about, you know, organic agriculture and sustainable agriculture, and sometimes they don't have to be the same thing. And one thing I'm really careful about, and I've become increasingly careful about, is I see how things get co-opted. I was on the beginning of things when, you know, organic agriculture, before it got certified by the USDA. So my first certifications, I had to go to the state of Maryland and talk to people there, and the USDA had no involvement. They didn't want any involvement because they didn't realize how important it was, or it wasn't financially, you know, for them to do it. So, just determining what's sustainable and organic agriculture, like I said, those things are very connected sometimes, but they can be two different things, because sometimes you have some growers who are very sustainable, they're not organic. Then you have some organic farmers who are good at what they do, but they're not sustainable. It's the way they take care of the land and things like that. So we have to be careful about that terminology. Next. So we can just hit the slides, and we can go down to talk about all these things. So one of the things we really kind of concentrate on at our farm in Beltsville, the university has a 143-acre research farm. So we grow pretty much everything on this research farm. We do all types of research. We do a lot of soil-based research, and we do also soilless. So we do a lot of aquaponics, hydroponics, and also soil-based. So really teaching people how to sustain the soil in urban areas is very important, because we live close to, you know, not too far from the Chesapeake Bay, so we try to keep as much of the resources on the land as possible as far as farming is concerned, soil, nutrients, and things like that. So we're constantly always looking at, you know, some of the things we can really do to be more sustainable as far as soil-based farming is concerned. So next. How many of you ever seen this book before? I advise all people just to get it. Now, some of it, you know, it was done a while ago. I mean, Booker T. Whatley, if you don't know who that is, he was a farmer from down south. But one of his claim to fame is that some of the things he did, one of his things was him and the guys who created Domino's Pizza. When they first got together, they started a collaboration. So initially, a lot of the tomatoes and things like that Domino's used for their pizza came from farms. And he was responsible for that, but he also had this book. And it's still, you know, it's kind of hard to find, if you can find that book. But it is an excellent book. But one of the most important things about that book, it shows, for me, and I'll say a little bit at the end about this, but I tell people all the time, you know, for agriculture and basically sustainable agriculture, one of the most important things a grower can have is imagination. Thinking outside the box, thinking how to do things differently, thinking why you should do things, thinking what you should not do on your land, just thinking in your imagination. Next. So one of the crops which I've always been interested in, rice. I worked for USDA and ARS in Beltsville, Maryland. I worked there for about 20 years. And I was involved with a lot of research, but primarily research I was involved with small fruit production. But we had also some rice experiments there at the farm in Beltsville at that time. So I got really interested in rice at that time, and I've always wanted to grow rice, you know, in an urban setting. So I've looked at ways to do that, and I found out some ways and varieties and some of the ways we do it, and we've been very successful. And I'm going to show you a little bit about it. Next slide. One of the things, again, is, you know, using how do you really give life to the soil? So many of the soil beds that we use, we get some of this free nitrogen, which is in the air. You can't smell it, you can't see it, but it's here. And it's it's free. And that is what makes plants green, and so it is free. So we get plants which really take that nitrogen in there, fix it in their roots. And we get other plants like the clover and vetch and things like that in there, the 3 cover crops in there. And we use those kind of things on some of the beds before we even grow the rice to just make sure that all the nutrients that we are going to use and the rice needs are in the soil and available. And we do this in urban areas and at the farm too. So we kind of look at different cover crops to use and selection of cover crops to use. Next. So this is our farm in Beltsville. So when I talk about rice, people, the first thing they think of is a flooded rice paddy. That is a way to grow rice, but we don't do that. We don't do that. So we grow a lot of our rice under plastic culture. We use drip irrigation. And 2 things, it grows a lot of rice. It grows some good tasting rice. And also when I really had it tested from my friend at the USDA, we found that it was almost negligible in the amount of heavy metals that it took up. One of the things that flooded rice production does is that something happens in the soil where you have arsenic and you have heavy metals, which are really bad. They are more taken up under those anaerobic conditions. When I say anaerobic conditions, I mean conditions where there's no air, just when there's water flooded in that rhizosphere where the soil is. So when you have those situations, you have a lot of heavy metals that have been taken up. So that's why a lot of baby food manufacturers have gone away from using certain types of rice because of the heavy metals. So if you just went into the Google search and say heavy metals, baby food, and rice, it'll give you enough information to read from now to next week. So we found out that, number one, negligible amount of heavy metals. The rice grows very well, and the yields were, comparable to, acre per flooded rice production. So that is, for me, if I had my druthers, I'd be growing rice just all the time. So it's been very fun and very productive, and I want to see if, for urban populations, vegetables have nutrients in them, of course, but what we really want to do, a lot of times is see how many calories we can grow in crops. So we want to grow more type of crops that have calories in it for urban food production. So we're looking at different crops we can grow in limited space areas and things like that. So that is how it's done, and it's a beautiful, wonderful crop to grow. Next slide. Another thing we do is niche crops like microgreens and restaurants, for things like that, where farmers and people in urban areas can get, be lucrative in what they're doing. When we were growing these microgreens, when I grew them, even before I started working, I grew microgreens and sold to restaurants. I mean, I was selling them for like $7 to $18 a pound for a box of microgreens. And there's a farmer who grows rice not too far from our farm. He sells his rice for $15, $16 a pound at a farmer's market. So these things can be viable, and that's what you have to really and that's really, that's what interests young people too. The technology interests young people, but also young people want to make money. I am very adverse of advising anybody to do this if you can't find a way to make money doing it. Hobby Lobby agriculture is not for me, and I don't want it to be for them. So, next slide. So again, imagination, is key. So I want, if you take nothing else away, let your imagination, be what really guides you as far as what you're doing for young people and for yourselves, and as far as what your farming operations. There's so much to do. My mentor, which I never met, and like George Washington Carver, you can't find a more imaginative individual than that as far as what he did. Constantly. Whenever you go to the store now to buy a piece of soy burger or soy hot dog or anything like that, that man was the man who created it. He created a whole new science called Mchezaji, which is using the agricultural waste product to give it industrial use. And so with that kind of innovation, we need to have that same type of innovation in our farming systems and in urban or rural or peri-urban or whatever we do. And I think we'll be okay. So in saying that, I'm going to leave and give my time to somebody else. But that goes along with the Farm Bill, because if you have a farm, if you can save your land, if you keep your land, you got to be profitable, and you got to find ways to be profitable. Okay. All right. So thank you very much, everybody.
More than ever, I believe that we who believe in freedom cannot rest. We can't rest until it comes. But we're on it, aren't we? We're on it. We can do this thing. It was so wonderful listening to you and piggybacking on your work. We are the baby in this room. And our work is as seed farmers. UJAMAA Farming Cooperative is a product of COVID. People got together on phone and on Zoom and said we can do something different and something better. And when you really think about the Farm Bill, it's at this level, and we were really at the grassroots level. Let's put some seeds in the hands of people and see what we can do. And creativity and imagination, but also studying what our ancestors did is a really essential part. Do not doubt their intelligence, because they survived, which is better than a lot of us are doing. Okay? Could you, next one? All right. So what happened was during COVID, we knew there was going to be a breakdown in the food distribution system. It happened. It went belly up. Before you knew it, people were dumping milk. People were closing down garden centers. So if you wanted to grow, you couldn't grow. And there became a group of concerned citizens, some of them who are in this room right now, who knew that we needed to get food to the people in need. My work previous to this had been in environmental justice, and we could actually map around the country where people were dying because of poor soil and pollution and everything bad that we know existed. If you take that COVID map and overlay it, accident, racism is not real, except it is real. It's a social construct. Race is not real. What we found out was that there was some talent in the community who cared about other people, and they gathered together to come up with some solutions. Now, during World War I and World War II, the government established victory gardens and so on to help communities take charge of their own food supply. But that didn't happen with COVID for the reason I just said. Look at who COVID was killing immediately. And so these grassroots folks got together, and we came up with a concept that we would distribute free heirloom variety of seeds to people in need. And y'all know who the people in your community are, right? Who are in need. You know what their needs are, and you know how to support them. So that work was focused on BIPOC communities. It was an all volunteer group. It was about 2,000 of us on a Zoom calls and everything else. And we established these seed hubs that received seeds from the heirloom seed industry and distributed them throughout the community. I'm gonna name some names up in here because I got Experimental Farm Network in the house, representatives from from Seed Savers, Hardy Seeds, Adaptive Seeds. These are the people who donated seeds for the purposes of making sure that the communities that were the hardest hit had the ability to not only feed themselves, we're talking food sovereignty, but also to learn to save those seeds so they would never be hungry for that again. That's the goal. Okay, next. So this is what it looked like. They came in bags. The seed industry was hit so hard. This is the organic seed industry I'm talking about. And they had to shut down anyway. The employees couldn't go in. Got to the point where you couldn't buy seeds. In California, they closed down all the garden stores. Couldn't even get soil. And so we distributed these seeds through the mail, through hand carrying seeds to community groups, to church groups, anybody, food pantries. And the seeds went out. We had about 100 volunteers that came to a seed hub that we established in Philadelphia. And the seeds went out like this. Next slide. And my work is with an organization called STEAM Onward. I work with high school kids and college kids, middle school kids. And the goal was, we've been working for many years on trying to find ways to create a healthier community, because our community was dying of diseases that weren't killing other people. And look at the rate of heart disease, look at diabetes, and all the other health-related, food-related diseases that were affecting us. So the kids had come up with this concept of pharmacy seeds, foods that heal. That was the concept. And so, next slide. So the kids started working to build gardens in community centers. We focus in on senior citizens and food pantries and all of that. But we realized that our kids really didn't know how to farm. They were mostly urban kids. And so we said, well, we're gonna need some help. And a dear friend of ours, a farmer, said, you better go get some more farmers, Bonetta, because I can't do it all. And so we began to organize, ask farmers, would you come in and teach the kids how to prepare plots? And so the first call was to have farmers come in and teach basic gardening skills. Some offer to teach organic skills, but you know, organic requires a whole lot of technology and maybe some knowledge that wasn't necessary to get you from greens real fast. I mean, you can have some salad greens, you can have food very quickly, and then you can take that responsibility in your own hand. So we have been doing work, we have been working with STEM careers in ag, environmental and natural resources. You talked a lot about it, brother. I had worked with your university because there were people there. You know, our goal was to recruit more people in all these various careers. Somebody mentioned drones. Well, yeah, you can get a degree in aeronautics and do ag work. All the careers are there in our field. And so we took all that project-based learning, the work that we were doing, we expanded to teach young people how to help their families survive through that really rough period that's still going on. I just got a call the other day, a message saying I can still go get my COVID test. COVID is not done. What we learned, however, was that we did have the capacity to solve some of our own problems. And so people began to bring us projects once they realized we had organized black farmers. And the first project we got was one called Dyes, Fiber, and Food. It came from professors at the University of Maryland Art School, MICA it's called. And they felt you could do it all. Now they were working on what they call sustainable fashion. Chemicals used in fashion industry are toxic, and so many of them have not even been accounted for. 40,000 chemicals in dyes. So they said, listen, we could do it all. We could raise our own dyes, our own fiber, and we could feed our community in the same place. So with the, next slide. So with the group we call the Tiller Corps that went out in the community to help start gardens, we began this journey. So the challenge we had, however, was the seeds that were donated were not necessarily the seeds that our community was requesting. They were hard to come by. You know what? One of the first things that was requested was, do you got any of that callaloo? Do you have any Scotch bonnet? That's what I was hearing, okay? No, I don't have any. It wasn't donated. And other things. So we decided that we had an opportunity to maybe start farming the things that were culturally meaningful to us. That's how we got going. So as we began to look at the seed industry, we began to realize that it was kind of lonely for me when I was going to some of these meetings. I was the only, you know, I grew up in San Jose, so I was used to being the only one. But in the seed industry, you know, the industry was basically white. And so we began to look at what we could do to maybe change that up so that we could become active in that industry. And so we had a conference, and from that conference, we eventually developed a memorandum of understanding, an agreement with the organic seed industry that they would support a reciprocal project in which we grew seeds, we learned the seed industry, we started a black, indigenous owned seed company with the support of the organic seed industry. And to quote my sister, Ira Wallace, well, they were all a bunch of hippies anyway, so they were cool at working with us. Okay, so let's talk about seed farming for just a second. You know, it's not rocket science. You don't have to know how to read and write to save seeds. Our ancestors did it before there was writing, the food that we eat today was developed by seed keepers, many of them, probably most of them women, who took the responsibility to prepare and think forward to the next season to protect their families, to make sure they had what they needed to have a healthy lifestyle. So sisters, here you go. I'm calling on you one more time. You are historically the seed keepers. Go on to the next one. So we formed this agreement, and the agreement worked out very well. We got all kinds of support from the organic seed industry. We got cash donations, but we got agreements to work in training our growers to partner with us. We work in an organized way using working groups to solve problems. We have about 15 working groups right now. We're reclaiming our heritage, and it's easy to do if you believe you can do it. Now, if you don't think you can do it, you probably can't do anything anyway. So this is UJAMAA seeds. You may have seen. If one of the things I hope you observed is there's some beautiful color there, right? You know that speaks to us, right? Could you go on to the next slide? So one of the first things that we realized that talked to our community was collard greens. Raise your hand if you've ever eaten any. Okay, raise your hand if you've grown any. Have you heard of the ultra-cross? So through this work, oh yeah, somebody's heard of it. So through this work, we realized there were only over 120 varieties of collard that were sitting in Grin, in the government collection of seeds, and people have forgotten them. So for the most part, many families had their own collard greens that their grandma passed them down, but it got to the point where people just weren't that interested in gardening. Go to the next one, please. And so a group of scientists, 2 scientists, went out collecting seeds, and they realized that most of the collards were actually being grown by people who didn't have anybody to pass them on to. Most of the farmers, the gardeners who were collecting these seeds, were over the age of 70. So they were able to collect these, but then they sat in Grin for a really long time. I'm going to talk more about Grin. Now, I don't know if you know who that is, but that's Ira Wallace, who is the mother of Southern agriculture. She is the queen of everything and the queen of me, okay? And without her, I will be honest with you, I wouldn't have had the nerve to even attempt to lead an organization without her, her support. She says to me, well, you know, I'm black and I'm a farmer, so I guess I'm a UJAMAA grower. So we said we can do this together, and with our help, my little nephew here, Nate Kleinman, y'all probably seen him, my little nephew that rose with me everywhere right here. We said we could do this, okay? We can take our family and we can reclaim our heritage. And you know what I mean by family, right? Y'all are all family. And anybody who agrees with us in our mission, who believes in what we do, is part of the UJAMAA family. It's an extended family, and we are so beautiful. I'm going to show you how beautiful we are. Now, those were all collard greens that you were seeing, and they were blooming, and that was the ultra-cross collection. So about 21 varieties of collard were planted together and allowed to cross, and they create all these new manifestations. And from those new greens, you'll see all these different things you need to learn about seeds. Like some of those collards can withstand amazing cold. They can take a 0-degree temperature. Some can take heat. Some are more resistant to bugs than others. And so by growing out that ultra-cross, you learn all these different things. I must tell you, I got some AKA sisters in here. There was pink and green ones, and there was blue ones, and there was almost black ones. You know, we had some really, it is beautiful to see those. But what we hope to do is find something that's culturally relevant, like color, and excite our community. I must say that collards were developed by African Americans in the United States. They are uniquely ours. Yeah, that's our stuff. Now, we took wild stuff and some European stuff, but that's our stuff. You know, I must say just for a second that in Africa we ate greens. We had those greens, but for some reason they didn't seem to make the transition to on slave ships the way that black-eyed peas and okra and other things did. And so when our ancestors got here, they located greens, things that were growing wild, and they bred those together and created this amazingly important Southern food, okay? Talk about what's in the name later. And here's another cross that is the ultra-cross okra. Now there's over 200 varieties of okra. In our collection of okra, there's 80, I call them mothers, there's 85 mothers, those original seeds. And the biodiversity you get from planting them is incredible. Did you know that okra leaves can be delicious? Did you know that? Okay, and the flowers are edible. And you can do almost anything. Now, you talked about imagination. You can do something. You can do the George Washington Carver thing on okra and other things. I'll show you later as we keep going on. Next slide. My grandson is growing one of those, he calls it dinosaur okra. He's 4 years old. They're in his garden. So this is an example of what we're talking about when talking about biodiversity. This is a Nanticoke squash. And believe it or not, this is one variety of squash. Look what God did. Look at this. I mean, this is the way this plant exhibits itself within this landrace. It's all this beautiful manifestation. Now, you need to plant out 40 or 50 plants to see this. But just to think about the biodiversity, look around this room and look at the biodiversity that's in our community. This is reflective of us, right? This is who we are. All right. Let me just say that this one is also resistant. I know some of your farmers are worried about those vine borers. Some of these old varieties are resistant to the disease and other predators that would come at them. That's what you learn as you explore seed breeding. Can you go to the next one, please? Another part of our work is really important, and that is making sure that our brothers and sisters who are suffering, who have been through things, who have been historically oppressed, who are fleeing war and disaster, that we farm for them as well. This is one of our sisters, Vivian Sansor, who has the Palestinian Heritage Library, and she has taken on as her personal responsibility to steward and protect Palestinian varieties for future generations. You know, it's amazing. Some of the stories she could tell will make you weep. We're going to bring her here. Y'all going to hear her. But the idea is that we have all been threatened. We've all been in war. We've all been attacked. We as a community need to sympathize and support our brothers and sisters around the world who are going through struggles. It's our job, nobody's but ours, right? It's our family. Also, I don't think I talked about rematriation, did I? Did I tell you about that? That's when you get back the seeds that belong to your family. When you do your family research and you find out what your heritage is, and you find those seeds. And I'll talk a little bit about it later, but one of the things we want to do is to make sure that all indigenous people and all people are growing the food, because we believe that you are what you eat and you are what your ancestors say. You are the one who should take the responsibility of holding on and preserving your own heritage. That's what we believe at UJAMAA. Next slide, please. So let me just show you this. And I already showed it to one of my AKA sisters that's in here. And I saw this collection. I went, OMG, do I have something that could get people excited? Look at this. This is amazing. So this is what you get. And where we're going with the idea about perennials are really important, because you know perennials are things that you can plant once. They will come back on their own. They will survive. But also, they're things that because they reproduce, you can share them. So remember, farmers are generous. You always have more tomatoes than you could use. You always have more zucchini. The same thing with this brassica. So the idea is for us to get back into the practice of understanding that seeds are our roots. They are who we are and who we come from, and they deserve a higher place. More than just a commodity, they are us, okay? Let's just talk for a second about this, which I begin the discussion about GRIN, which is the National Depository of Seeds. And I'm gonna go a little bit and show you how to access that. That's the work that we're doing, trying to teach people how to get back, how to find your seeds are important. But here's to now, raise your hand if you know what a tree collard is. Okay. All right. So I grew up in California. I thought everybody knew what that was. But no, it is a variety of collard that is perennial and grows very tall, like a tree. It's big. They're beautiful. There's varieties out there that we need to bring back. There's Gullah Geechee variety that needs to be in the hands of my brothers and sisters and my cousins in South Carolina. How do we get them back what belongs to them? Something they can brag about, right? All right. Next slide, please. And then as you look also, in addition, stone fruit is another example. You know, there's wild food everywhere. We have a grower that does a workshop called Your Lawn is Your Salad, okay? There's wild food everywhere around us, and it's nutrient dense. We should be eating it. So the thing about wild stone fruit is native, it's perennial. It doesn't require fertilizers or fungicides or herbicides. And they're becoming more and more rare as people ignore them, step on them, or spray some Roundup on them. So this is work that needs to be done. I'm just saying that fewer and fewer of these are available because we have not conserved these, protected them, and brought them forth to our children. Our children should know how to find wild things in the woods. Raise your hand if you ever went foraging with your grandparents. Anybody? Did you go for mustard green, collard green, cress, mushroom? Okay, so if you look, it's almost lost, and these are the best farmers in America. We've got to reclaim this tradition, okay? They're disappearing as we speak. All right, next slide. Anybody know what this is? Want to take another guess? This is sorghum. Next slide, please. Next slide. Let's take your time. Okay, so what is sorghum? Well, it is a beautiful grain that comes originally from the Horn of Africa. It's as African as I am, okay? But it is so amazing that it's naturalized all over the world. What's so important about it, and we started with this is the first crop that our kids planted. Why? Because it was culturally important. It was an African crop. Secondly, because it's so easy to grow. It's easy to grow, requires very little water, a sixth of the water that corn requires, almost no tending. I mean, they didn't do a very good job of weeding it, and yet they got a crop. And this is a meal, and it was very popular around the turn of the century. The goal was that sorghum could become a sugar crop, but it wouldn't crystallize, so sugar cane beat it out. But the thing about it is, my ancestors had this. My grandfather always had sorghum in the house, sorghum syrup. Raise your hand if you know what that is. If you tasted it, you know it's yummy, and it's high in nutrient. It's protein rich. It's a wonderful food. Could you go to the next slide? Okay, so here we are. Yeah, that's us. And that is a 2-horse mill. And one of the things we found out, it made people so excited to look at what their ancestors had done. You see that? So there's people pushing it around, it requires a weight at the top, and that mill goes around and they feed the cane in, and it produces a delicious juice. The juice can be made syrup or molasses, but we're doing more than that. We're making beer. We're making soda pop from it. We're making rum and some other good things out of it. Just the beginning. So when we think of George Washington Carver, we think of sorghum. We believe that we can do this with sorghum. Next slide. So here's what the juice looks like. I know it's kind of green, but it is so yummy and tasty. It's so good. So next slide, please. And then if you cook it, you can cook it right on your stove, or you can boil it like our ancestors did outside, and this is what it looks like in the molasses form. You know y'all should be buying this. You should not be eating some of the junk you eat. Tell Aunt Jemima to get over. This is what you should be having on your pancake. Next slide. So why sorghum? Well, it's a staple crop. It's a dye. It is medicinal. It's a building material. It's used for livestock. Anybody growing it as a forage crop? Sorghum? Nobody's growing? Okay. Most people don't know that it's even edible. They're using it for animal feed. I mentioned before, it requires very little of the land, and it's not that hard on the farmers either, unless you try to do like we do and take it down with a machete, then it's pretty hard. The idea is that it's so useful. And it's a grain. It can grow up to 16 feet tall, and you can harvest it at different phases, and it has different uses. At this phase, when it's fresh, and go on one more time. When it's fresh, you see that it can be eaten like a rice, and then at other times it can be made like a wheat. It can be porridge is eaten as breakfast at the Horn. It can be used as flour, made bread from it. Let's just do a lot with sorghum. Okay, so the thing about these crops that I'm showing you, many of them come from the U.S. government Germ Resource Information Network, GRIN. And this is a source that's available, but not widely available. And we're asking that the Farm Bill include that. All right, next slide, please. And so all around the country, there are repositories of seed. And this is just an example of where they are. Keep going. And this is what's in there. Okay, so if you look, you'll see that there's all these seed families. There's species, 16,000 species. And there's all these different varieties that are within there. It's all sitting there at GRIN. But the way it's written now is it's only accessible to researchers for the most part. You have to prove that you're going to do research with it. This is what GRIN is currently saying, that it's not available to people like us, home growers. And so we're going to ask that they open this up. Next slide, please. This is an example of something that was pulled out of that. So there's seeds from all over the world there. And if you look at this one okra, look at all the biodiversity that exists within this one okra variety. Next slide, please. This is another melon. This melon is sort of like a cucumber. I know it looks sweet. It's not, but it's from the Maldives, and the Maldives are under threat from disappearing. And so by us learning more, looking for these varieties, we can help to conserve and preserve these amazing varieties. Next slide. I want to talk about this one because every UJAMAA grower, we ask them to seek their own seed story. And I know I got some potential UJAMAA growers in here. Do you have a story? Do you know what's important to you? I know you got Sister Bonetta has one. Raise your hand if you have a story of something that's important to you. And so, you know, in Brother Kleinman's search for his own story, he ran across this plant that was in the catalog. And Odessa, you probably know, as a city that the Russians bombed just recently. And along with this beautiful flower that has all of this beautiful biodiversity came the story that came with it. And so it's very important for you to collect the stories and the history of your family and know that work. Could you go on to the next one? I want to talk about this one because this is my seed story. So when I was a child, I heard stories about our family having this really wonderful watermelon that they raised that was so successful that they were able to send kids to college based on this watermelon. But by the same token, I had family members that, and you know, there are people who made fun of watermelon. And they laughed at people who ate it. And this, at the turn of the century, there was a villainization of watermelon. You know, it's an African crop. Did y'all know that? So it's just like so many other things, like my dark skin was vilified. So much about us has been vilified, but we're taking it back. So I want to tell you that that memorabilia is very expensive, okay? I have cousins that collect it. What does it say about us as a country that we vilify food? Especially we know that black farmers made so much money selling it and were so successful that there was an industry move to reduce the popularity of watermelon so that we could continue to have the wealth of it. We're reclaiming Stone Mountain watermelon. So my family, it took me about 10 interviews to get to it. I'm now in possession of the melon that my family grew in Winsboro, South Carolina, that supported us and sending children to college and gave us bragging rights. We've bragging about farming in this country since 1710. We know farmers are amazing, they're brilliant, and they are the future. Farming is the future of America. Next slide, please. I just want to show you this. This is a perennial crop of sorghum. Keep on going real fast. Yeah, that's what it looks like. We're growing this at a test station. We have a seed farm at Princeton University. The goal is to have a perennial sorghum. Keep going, please. all this beauty that's there, it all has different purposes, different ways you could use it. I don't know if you're familiar with any of these varieties. Some of you had never really weren't that familiar with sorghum as a crop, but all that is waiting for us to explore and to learn. So we're asking that the Farm Bill gives support for us doing this research, learning the use of it, and getting it together. And I think corporations shouldn't be the only ones allowed into the seed bank. I think that, give me one more slide. I think that's it. You basically get the point that I'm trying to make, expand that, make that available for us to get in. And one more slide. All right, and we'll talk about this later, but you understand that value add is a way to exploit that. Go on to the next slide. And all of these programs are difficult for urban farmers and small farmers to get into. We need to make that easier. The match on the lamps is very difficult to make. And those are some of our growers. Keep one more. And that's it. UJAMAA farming. Come and learn seed farming. Claim your heritage. Thank you. We have seeds if you want some. Thank you, honey.
All right. That actually pretty much concludes our beautiful summit. So round of applause. Round of applause for our panel. We have lots of people to thank, so just sit still for a moment. Get ready to applaud and give love to our Airly staff. Are they in the room? We asked them to come in. They have been so generous. And maybe before they come in, I'm going to go through the rest of. Oh, okay, good. All right. Oh, we do. I thought we were rushing. We've got a few minutes for questions. I was going to applaud for our staff, but we have a few minutes for questions. Take a deep breath off of that beautiful agrobiodiversity. Liberate the seeds from the germplasm. And by the way, when you go to the Hill tomorrow, that is such a key ask. The National Plant Germplasm System, liberate the seeds and bring them to BIPOC-led seed movements to really strengthen indigenous and African diaspora agriculture biodiversity to nourish the people. So that is such a specific Farm Bill ask. So we do have a little more time. I'm gonna exhale a little and pass the mic to take questions.
My question is for Dr. Che, is it, from UDC? Did I say your name correctly? I'm sorry if I didn't. Oh, Che, okay. I'm curious to know, throughout the District of Columbia, where else UDC might be operating urban farms, urban gardening space. I was a resident of DC for probably close to 8 years and only barely got involved with some urban farming very briefly before leaving in 2021, but UDC is such a hidden gem, and I think more people should pay attention to y'all, so plug away.
Yeah, I just, if I had a dime or dollar for every time I went someplace and people said they'd never heard of UDC, it's just, it's amazing. But hidden gem, true. But we have the 143-acre farm in Beltsville. We produce everything there. And a lot of the food, we didn't shut down during the pandemic. We just revved up production, and all the food that we produced went out into the public. And I think last year we produced about almost close to 8,000 pounds of food, and we just donated to the public. So we do a lot of that, but we have this concept called food hubs. So we have these food hubs in a few different wards in the city. Actually, the campus on 4200 Connecticut Avenue is a food hub. There is a 40,000 square foot food producing green roof on campus. There is aquaponics, hydroponics, and a student-led community garden on campus. In Ward 7, we just had a large program last week. We have an urban farm, which is at the corner of Southern and East Capitol, which is a huge urban farm where people grow and, it's soil-based gardening. Let me see, Ward 8, we have a hydroponics and aquaponics operations there, which are going now. And in Ward 5, Bertie Backus campus, we have a community garden, and we have vertical growing, and we have also hydroponics and aquaponics and hydroponics Now, aquaponics will be coming online soon, it's there, but we also have hydroponics. So we have these different food hubs throughout the city where anybody can come and volunteer. We have classes in soil-based and soilless production, and we just try to get, what we need to do is just create more intelligent growers and people to grow more food and also grow more food while sustaining the planet at the same thing. So it's one thing to grow food, but can we sustain the planet while we're doing it? That's what we have to do. So we have to do both of those things simultaneously. But yeah, it's a lot out there that we're doing that, sometimes people just don't hear about. No, we don't.
Sustainable.
We don't. Unfortunately, we don't. Our farm is so close to Bowie State.
Some scholars.
Millie Trevino Sauceda, and I'd like to add a little bit about what Lorette was talking about, and it included that in the Farm Bill, we're asking, as I was sharing yesterday, that we were at the USDA some weeks ago, and there's a farmer group coordinator that the Rural Coalition and other groups pushed very hard for us to have a position there, and it was first time ever in 2008. And there's lots of things that are still happening with our communities. And as Lorette was sharing, and yesterday Amy was also sharing, that it's agricultural workers have not been considered as much within the Farm Bill. And it's very important that we get not only noticed, but support. The farmer group coordinator is just one position, and we're not even sure where that position will be in the near future, and if it's going to continue a political position or what. But it needs to do more, because there's a lot more things that need to be done, and we're trying to be more intelligent, we are, but more thoughtful in terms of what other things we need. I mean, in terms of housing, I talked yesterday about housing. We still have 3 or 4 families living together every time they have to migrate, or just to be able to survive, because wages are still very, very low. The majority of the states, wages are very, very low. And there should be space in rural development to provide some support for farm workers and just different things. I'm not sure, maybe Lorette, you can add a little bit more of conversations we have had, and when we had the convening, we did have several workshops, and there were about more than 60 women in those several workshops, and they were saying, why are we not included in the Farm Bill? We're part of it. And because of COVID, it was the first time ever that farm workers, agricultural workers were called essential workers. We were not treated as essential. We were just called essential workers, so we continued working. That was it. And we lost thousands of workers because of COVID, because they had to continue working. And even USDA right now is looking into having the H-2A program within it. DOL is not even following and monitoring how they're supposed to be monitoring the H-2A workers program. There's a lot of abuses there. It's kind of like what we called before the Bracero program. It's the same thing. It's just different in the sense of having a different kind of name. We still have workers, being brought to the United States, taking away their visas so they don't have to go anywhere, and not provided the food that they need to be provided, or healthy food, or nutritious food, and the housing conditions are really, really bad, and they're supposed to be room and board. And there's where we're going with, instead of this country, instead of making sure we have a better immigration system, it's bringing workers from other countries and keeping the workers. We all know what slavery has been in the past. It's the same thing right now. It's just very modernized. So, Lorette, can you help us here?
Yeah, well, thank you, Millie. And, I think, number one, and I know my chairperson, Mr. Zippert, will agree, everybody's got to show up and vote. We can have this new majority, but not with the current system that we have right now, because if you look at the way the whole system is structured, it's not, we don't have the power that our community should have to get comprehensive immigration reform. But beyond that, in the context of the Farm Bill, we need disaster programs for farm workers. We need housing. There's a 17-year-old woman who, sometime within the last year, who was pregnant, who had been working in the field sprayed with pesticides and had heat stress, and she died. And this happens regularly all the time. These are children, their houses are being sprayed. There's arsenic in the water down in Coachella Valley in the farm worker housing. Enforcement needs to happen, but laws need to happen. So we need to work together on all of that. But remember all the things we're talking about definitions. Those are really, really hard subjects. It's how do we come together? Because if we come together as a force, maybe we can make some of these changes. It all goes back to the type of agriculture system where our sister Bonita's got to go back and recover the plants that we never should have lost. In urban ag, people used to have gardens in all their places, and now the soil is dirty, and we've had development. We've got development. I live in Arlington, Virginia. Every other day, somebody's going to buy my house, and they're going to build a big, huge, that's not sustainable. People need yards. But if you think about all of this, it goes back to the 1862 land grants and the Homestead Act and, tearing up all the traditional forms. We need to go back and remember and then look at this whole system of agriculture. And it's like now we're adding, it's going to be climate smart and you're going to be able to see that your Cheerios are good somehow. And that's not all we need to do. We need to remember, first of all, who are the workers, who are the farmers, who are the people with the knowledge that's going to bring us forward. And, and I think, Millie, that means we need more than a farm worker coordinator. We need actual accountability by producers that don't treat their farm workers right. But more than that, we need to get back to the local-oriented. Kolu was asking me, my dear sister Kolu, it's not specialty crops we want to fund. It's local food production that we need to invest in. And I'm tired of hearing everybody say that Black farmers, Latino farmers, tribal farmers need to grow their capacity. Look at Ms. Bonetta. Does she, there's no lack of capacity there. Somebody's saying, there's a lack of capacity. You guys don't know how to keep your records. You don't know how to do your money. Farmers don't know how to keep their records. Organizations don't know how to. You don't know how to deal with your finances. Let's train you to write grants. We don't need to be trained to write grants. We just need somebody to be on staff that writes grants. And we need a finance person, and we need this person, and the farmer needs those things. We need an investment in the infrastructure among us to be able to retake this food system and make sure that everybody, you know, who touches the land knows how to take care of it, and that we honor the workers and we honor the people, and that we remember that every time we eat food. So I don't know, we could go into a lot of things, and I know it's the end of the day, but you know, this whole system of agriculture is not the right system of agriculture. But we have to be thoughtful, we have to work together, we have to have the hard conversations, and shout out to our sister Dania and your whole team for leading us through a very important conversation. You know, let's not just go away from this table and do nothing. You know, we were onto something here, so, you know, thank you.
All right, thank you.